Good afternoon or good morning. And thank you everyone who's able to join us live and welcome to those of you who are listening to the recording. My name is Kristen Schrader and it is my privilege to share with you a little bit about how Parker Dewey can help support your micro-internship initiatives at scale. So what we're going to talk about today is how you can take a micro-internship concept, but expand it significantly, supporting both your students, but also potentially some other external stakeholders. And we call that a micro-internship program. And I'll define it and give you lots of details as we go along. But just a couple of housekeeping things. We are recording today's conversation, but please keep the chat hopping because I would love to make sure nobody leaves with questions that are unanswered because I know there's a lot of content that we're going to go through. What I'm hoping for today is that this be a starting point to plant some seeds, to give you some ideas of ways that you can use this micro-internship idea and hopefully help it align to, yes, supporting students, but also potentially some of the other institutional goals that you're all talking about. I know that it's kind of middle to end of November, so college recruiting season is probably mostly wrapped up, and probably a lot of attention is now being turned towards 2025 and what some of the priorities, goals, and so on are. And so what I'm hoping is that this is a timely opportunity to catch you when you're starting to have a little more capacity to think of some additional ideas and opportunities. And so again, really excited to have you join me today in today's conversation. So thank you so much for taking the time. So just to give you a bit of a roadmap for our conversation, we'll talk a little bit, start very granular. What is a micro-internship? Just to make sure everybody's on the same page. But then want to share some data with you to give you some insights about why and what is the effectiveness of a micro-internship. And then we're going to turn our attention fully on micro-internship programs because that's where there's a lot of nuance, a lot of opportunities. And so we'll talk about how to launch a program and break it down into, okay, who do you need to involve? What's some of the pros and cons of different timing models, some funding sources, and some other logistical things to think about. And then percolated throughout today's conversation are examples, case studies. What are other schools doing to bring these micro-internship programs to life? And again, I know I haven't defined a micro-internship program yet. We'll get there in just a moment. But we'll start first with the micro-internship because I do want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. How we define them and how we always have defined them here at Parker Dewey is that they are short-term paid professional projects completed on demand by highly motivated early career talent. So just to break down a couple of key things, these are all designed to be project-based experiences with centered around a specific deliverable. So something that a student can complete in addition to juggling whatever else they might be up to, whether that be classes, extracurriculars, work, athletics, and so on. This is designed to give them some paid, resumeable experience. But one thing that I do want to emphasize is that this is a real project. Every single project has an organization on the other end that's waiting for that deliverable, that's really excited to work with the student and needs their help on that particular project. And so this is a great opportunity for that student to get this great experience while also these other stakeholders to benefit as well. Most of these projects range between 10 to 40 hours. Most are completed within a few days to a few weeks, but a 10-hour project generally is completed in maybe the few days time frame. The 40-hour project usually is completed not over a 5-day period, but stretched into a few weeks, maybe even a couple of months. But every project has a specific start date and end date. These are designed to be easy for both the student and the host organization in that Parker Dewey, for all of the projects on our platform, we handle the payment. The company who posted it, they own the work product, but all of that student payment comes directly from Parker Dewey. So that makes it a lot easier for you as well as you're starting to think through, how can I administer or pay students for opportunities? Some of you may have done a lot of that over the summer. And from what I hear from our partners, it can be a big challenge. And so again, we handle all of that as a key benefit. But that also protects the students so that they can go on to do one micro internship that maybe is tied to their school, or they can do as many micro internships as they want on Parker Dewey, and it all, again, that payment comes from the same source. That makes it a lot easier come tax time as well, because they are getting one tax form that they can then take to whoever's helping them with their taxes, and it just, again, administratively makes it a lot easier. The payment is fixed fee so that students aren't having to track hours. They're paid upon completion of whatever that specific project would be. Last thing I want to touch on is that these are all designed to be professional projects, similar to what students they were doing in their internships, but all as specific individual projects. And so they're professional, they're not bag my groceries, deliver Uber type things, babysitting, any of that stuff. These are designed to be professional tasks. So again, happy to answer questions along the way, but I did want to just clarify what a micro internship is. But let's talk about why they're so effective, because we really see that there is a sweet spot where this supports students, organizations, and you as well. So let's start with the students. What we hear from students and what we see in the feedback that they give us is that this helps them to demonstrate their skills, develop those professional relationships, that network, particularly if you think about students that maybe weren't able to do an internship this past summer because they're a first or second year student, maybe too early in their program, or maybe they just chose to do other things or had to do other things because they had to work or they had to do academic coursework or research or whatever else. They chose to study abroad, etc. These are ways that they can still develop their resume, but not have to give up some of those other things that are commitments of their time as well. We also see this as a really great sweet spot for students to be able to explore, to gain professional experience, but also to help them discern, do I like this? Do I not? One early micro intern, you may have heard this analogy before, one early micro intern equated to this as a bit like dating, in that they can do lots of different micro internships before the stakes get even higher and have to then decide what is the right internship or full-time role. In the word of this early micro intern, he said, micro internships is going on a date. Internships is like getting engaged, getting married is what the full-time job can, and maybe not the best analogy, but it certainly illustrates that the stakes get higher and get higher pretty quickly for these students and having to make a lot of really key decisions, as we all know, having worked with students and in these career services roles. And of course, they're getting all these benefits while also earning income. And I can't de-emphasize that enough, because we all know that students, they have a lot of expenses and demands for their time. And many of them have to work and go to school. This is making sure that they are being paid for doing real work. And just philosophically and ethically, that's something that we here at Parker Dewey just think is fundamentally important and critical. And so every project on our platform is paid fairly, full stop. That's just, again, non-negotiable for us. But let's now think about the companies, because many of you may also be focused on, how do I make these employers happy, or how can I make up new ways that they can engage with my students? Well, what we hear from companies is that the micro internships allow them to consider students that they may otherwise not have considered. Think about the student studying the liberal arts when the company is there to recruit for a business student. Those liberal arts students may be their next great hire because of the written communication and communication skills and all of the great core skills that they are looking for in their organization, that maybe they're just focused so much on students that, again, may not be that great best fit. They're more likely to try a student that, again, may not have normally been on their radar. We also see companies are far more likely to look for students not based on GPA, major, or school when they're considering micro interns. And this also allows them to engage hiring managers. So for example, the recruiters that come to the career fair, by and large, are representatives of HR, whereas the micro-internship allows the companies to engage the hiring managers who are going to be working with the students when they're hired. This allows them to have a voice earlier in the process to determine, is the student a good fit? We're also seeing companies use micro-internships as a recruiting tool. They don't just post one or two projects and work on just those. They're hiring students at scale. They're posting one project and hiring 20 students to be able to see, of those 20, who are the greatest fits for the open roles that they're trying to fill. And then, of course, all of this is also benefiting you and your work with students, with these companies and organizations, whether that be helping with those metrics around placement, and I hate that word, but conceptually, are we getting students jobs? That is what a micro-internship is intended to do. It's to be that stepping stone for the students. And in many cases, this is how they find who they're going to be doing an internship with or a full-time role. And you'll see some examples of that throughout today's conversation. We also see there's nice opportunities to integrate with whatever they're learning in the classroom. And again, we'll talk a little bit about that. While most micro-internships are occurring as an extracurricular opportunity, we do see opportunities where students are going to professors during office hours to say, hey, I got this project. This is a great way for them to put to practice what they're learning in the classroom. And then alumni engagement is another opportunity, which we'll talk a little bit about as well. And the data is showing that the impact is real. So for students, 95% of them have said this is how they want to be recruited. This is how they want to work with companies. They want to go to work to see, is there a mutual fit? And of course, getting paid for it doesn't hurt either. We also see that students who completed micro-internships are significantly more likely to stay in whatever job they select in that first year after graduation. I'm just highlighting a few data points here, but from a company side, thousands of organizations have engaged with micro-internships. We don't give specific numbers on that because it's frankly ever growing. And so we see organizations as small as the one-person startups all the way up to the Fortune 100s that we've all heard of. We see nonprofits, we see government agencies, and the full spectrum. And we also hear that 97% of them are really happy with that deliverable. And 98% of projects are successfully completed. So again, students do a really great job. The other data I want to highlight is over 800 colleges and universities have partnered with Parker Dewey. So if you're not a partner already, I'm happy to talk a little bit about how that works separately. It's going to be outside of the scope of today's conversation. But again, this is something that is designed to be an extension, a deepening opportunity for our partnership. And then I mentioned this already, but 80% of the students selected come from historically underrepresented backgrounds. So for your institutions that are focused on equity and inclusion, this is an opportunity that potentially could align with some of those goals as well. The other thing I know lots of us are very focused on are the NACE career readiness competencies. And we survey the students after they completed micro-internships to ask them about, within that 10, 20, 40-hour project, what kind of impact did it make? And we see, and you can see the data here, that the students by and large say that they have improved either a lot or a little for most of those competencies. And even those that say no change, that building confidence is a huge factor for micro-internships and where this can fit in, because this certainly helps students to see, understand, to feel like, yeah, I can go ahead and work for these organizations that I may not have otherwise felt like I could. We know that the imposter syndrome is something that many students struggle with. And so this micro-internship can be a really big eye-opening stepping stone for the students, and something that we see in the student feedback and the testimonials as well. So bringing us up to speed on the benefits, I wanted to touch on the fact that Parker Dewey has recently expanded its opportunities for partnership. And why? Well, we heard from you all that having more options, more access, just more opportunities to be able to support students, employers, and other initiatives on or off campus is valuable. And where we can help, we are certainly excited to do so. To be clear, and we'll talk more about this in a couple weeks with some partner updates conversation that we have coming down. But those of you who are partners already, there is no change. There's still no cost. We'll keep those websites up and running. We are shifting to a new data policy, which again, we'll talk about more in a couple of weeks. But we do have some additional options for those of you who want it. Parker Dewey Plus, I'll talk more about in a moment, and then this program side, which is the focus of today's conversation, which just gives more on-demand access and more opportunities supporting your students. To be clear, the program, when you see starting at $10,000, that is money that is, as you'll see, significant of that is, most of that is going directly into the pockets of your students. And again, I'll give you some examples of what other programs and how the funding models have worked just in just a moment. So just quickly about Parker Dewey Plus, in case you haven't heard about it, this is an on-demand dashboard. We can't tell you how often we get the question, hey, do you guys have an admin access? Yes, now we do. This is developed in collaboration with, and after hundreds of conversations with partners who've said, yep, I need access to this, this, and this. And being able to pull reports on demand is a key benefit, but you also can use it to see how have my students responded to employer questions? What kind of feedback have they received from these companies? What does their profile look like for those of you who advise students? And what are the metrics in terms of how much income my students have earned? So that's all available on demand. You can download those reports real time, anytime through this Parker Dewey Plus partnership. That also includes a student ambassador. So for everybody who is stretched and they only have so many hours in the day, which is everybody, this is a way for you to select one of your students who can then do the marketing and manage some of the social media and any other aspects of launching or relaunching Parker Dewey Micro-Internships for your students. And again, we have a project description already mapped out, real easy to implement, and the payment for that micro-internship is included as part of that Parker Dewey Plus partnership. But I want to now focus, though, on this partner program. What is this? Well, how we define it. These are paid micro-internships that are posted exclusively for your students to work on projects on behalf of organizations of your choice. And so you decide who the students are, you decide who the organizations are, you decide how much they're going to make, and funding for this program, including the amount paid for the students, comes from you. And so again, this is money going directly from your budgets set into the pockets of the students who are completing these micro-internships. No differently than how many institutions have experiential learning budgets to support students who are doing unpaid internships. We hear that a lot of schools want to stretch those dollars to support even more students. That's a very common funding source for a lot of these institutions, or for these micro-internship programs. But as you'll also see, we also hear that this can align or maybe tap into some other budgets or other opportunities alignment. We see schools that hear about this and then it circles up to the provost and sometimes even the president, who get excited about where these short-term projects can also help with other goals, other things that are top in mind for the institution. The other population we do hear a lot about is how these projects can support students that just may not otherwise have had access to paid experiential learning. Maybe they're studying an academic program that typically has unpaid internships. Maybe they're student athletes that just can't do an internship. Maybe they're first-gen students that just may not even know that that's what they should be doing, or maybe need this as a professional development or confidence building opportunity. So again, we see lots of programs focused on populations like what I just mentioned. How long have we been doing this? Well, this actually began about 4 years ago. Our two earliest programs were the Kansas Micro-Internship Program and Swarthmore College's SWATworks program. I'll talk a little bit more about those in a moment. But these organizations, schools, they came to us and said, hey, we have this idea. and we need some help with administering it. Now, again, I'll tell you more of the history in a moment. But those two initial partnerships and programs have expanded significantly so that now we are working in collaboration with dozens of higher education institutions and education partners to run these different programs. And you'll hear more about lots of these throughout the presentation. What you hear in the presentation today is not a comprehensive list. We've got others that could certainly talk a little bit more about. We also run programs on behalf of nonprofit organizations. They may have secured grants themselves, or sometimes Parker Dewey was the beneficiary of the grant. We also run programs on behalf of organizations that support companies. So think about the chambers of commerce. We have a partnership, for example, with the Greater Akron Chamber. And we just recently, over the summer, launched a program tied to the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, which supports Indiana companies, but also is working to address the issue of brain drain throughout the state. And then lastly, and certainly not the least, is we have corporations that are funding micro-internships. And there's two primary use cases, biggest one being corporate recruiting. They want to tap into students who are excited to work for their organization via these micro-internships. They don't see this as a replacement for their internship programs or other on-campus engagement, but they see this as a kind of top-of-funnel recruiting strategy. This allows them to reach students that they may otherwise have missed, the students that don't come to their table at the career fair for whatever reason, the students that they want to meet earlier in their academic program so that they'll be or their organization will be top of mind by the time the student's ready for that summer internship, maybe their junior year. They're wanting to engage students that may, again, not have the time to go to career events because of athletics or their time commitments and so on. And then we also work with a number of corporations that have philanthropic initiatives where we become a part of it. So we've run a program, for example, it's actually wrapping up right now, is with Amazon tied to their career choice program, tuition reimbursement program. And then we also have a partnership with IBM Skills Build that is involving a number of different HBCUs and then is set to expand in the new year. So just to give you some examples, this is not something that we necessarily set out to do, but was created because of demand, because these partners said, we love this, but we want to do this more. And Parker Dewey, we need your help to scale. So case in point, the Kansas Micro-Internship Program, this was founded because of the Kansas Board of Regents, who ran an apprenticeship program, but found just a lot of cost, a lot of heavy lift, and low conversions in terms of students getting hired. And so they flipped the model a bit and said, let's try these short-term projects. And this program is focused on brain drain, trying to retain Kansas students in the state, but it's supporting companies across the state, for-profits, nonprofits, and everything else, as long as they have a location in Kansas and they pick a student who goes to a public Kansas college or university. That's the eligibility criteria. This program started relatively small in 2021, but has grown significantly to the point that earlier this year, the Kansas Micro-Internship Program actually received a budget allocation from the state to sustain the program through this fiscal year. It also has funding currently with the Strata Foundation, focused on some of its community college efforts. And so any of you who might be tied to a community college, yes, we do find micro-internships are a fantastic resource for students pursuing two-year degrees, whether that be a two-year terminal degree or if the students are interested in transferring. The other case study I'm going to highlight at the moment is SWOTworks. This is Swarthmore's and focus mostly on alumni engagement and, of course, Swarthmore students. Now, the history behind SWOTworks is in the early COVID days, like all of us, we were all scrambling, trying to figure out how do we help students in this really, really challenging and difficult time. Swarthmore's solution was to develop this micro-internship program connecting Swarthmore alumni with students. And then Swarthmore initially ran the program itself, funding the projects and on behalf of the alums. And so the alumni, the only ask was, hey, post a project, pick a student, mentor the student through this project. They didn't have to fund the project, so it made it a much easier ask for the school. Flash forward through to early in 2021, and Swarthmore reached out to us and said, we love this program, but it's a lot of work for us to administer on our own. Can you help? And so we created the marketing collateral and the websites, and we already had the platform to provide that infrastructure and have been running the program ever since. Now, about a year or so ago, the SWOTworks program did have a significant change in that instead of it being run on an ongoing basis, it now is specifically focused on school breaks. And so literally I was exchanging emails with the team just earlier today. Their promotion to students is going out right now for their winter break program. That's a common model that we see, is taking advantage of those sometimes 3, 4, 6-week periods of time where students have that availability and organizations want to work with students and get some year-end projects wrapped up. That's where this can fit in really nicely. And again, this also supports alumni and a new opportunity to engage. So some things to think about before launching a program, and we're going to dig into each of these. First and foremost, who do you want to involve? Whether that be students, organizations, or other stakeholders around campus. When? I just mentioned Swarthmore has chosen to reallocate its program to focus on school breaks. We'll talk about the pros of each of those models versus having it ongoing. Why do schools do this? What are some of the KPIs that they're most interested in? And then lastly, funding sources. That's of course very top of mind. How does school pay for this? And again, we'll give you some different examples and ideas. So first of all, who all can be involved? Well, first of all, we hear from students. Schools are really focused typically on specific student populations that come from underrepresented backgrounds. Sometimes they're focused on students who are in specific academic programs or niche populations of students, such as, again, I mentioned this a few times, student athletes. I did put under the consider this side here that we're hearing a lot about students who have completed first-year experience programs doing micro-internships then in their second year. So for example, we're running a couple of different programs right now where year one last year, the students were first-year students. They completed a robust professional development program. And then this year, the school is funding a limited number of micro-internships for those interested students to put their professional development training now to work on these projects. We see that sophomore year is a nice sweet spot for micro-internships. This is a great time to capitalize on the fact that they have some academic coursework under their belts, but then they're not too distracted by the pressures of junior and senior year. So again, nice opportunity as a sophomore engagement strategy. The next thing to think about are the organizations, and this can be anybody. You can decide if you want it to just be local small businesses, nonprofits, the big corporations. Are they connected to alumni or other friends of your institution? Again, you set those rules. So to give you another example, we had a program that we ran over this past summer focused on student athletes. And this was another time-based program capitalizing on the 6 weeks that this particular team of student athletes, this was a football team, the 6-week window before they came back to campus for fall training camp. And so they narrowed it down. 6 weeks is when this is going to take place. They engaged alumni to participate in the program and to offer these different projects. And this program was so high profile in scope that the coach, and this is a Division I top tier school, I would love to share the name, but they haven't talked too publicly about it yet. So we're always sensitive to that. But anyway, the coach came to the final presentation and really spoke just volumes about the impact and just how great of an experience it was for these student athletes. The next thing to think about are those external stakeholders. So who would you want to engage? Faculty, the small business community, nonprofits, alumni, corporate partners, and you'll see a bunch of logos here just to give you some ideas as you're looking through some case studies, or you might see some institutions that might be similar to you and where they're maybe seeing the overlap of micro-internships. But I also want to take a break here and ask those of you who are joining today, if you real quick just could answer this quick poll question. So of these ideas and what we shared thus far, if you were to build a micro-internship program right now, who would you want to engage? faculty, small businesses, nonprofits, alumni, corporate partners. Don't no right or wrong answer, but I just love to hear what's resonating. All right, I'll leave the poll up for a few extra minutes in case there's some folks that are still answering. But popular responses so far are the bottom three: nonprofits, alumni, and then those corporate. Oh, now we got a few more votes for nonprofits, but and then the small business community is also top of mind for many of you. But did hear some votes for every single one of you. So as you can tell, there's no right or wrong answer. This can fit into a number of different buckets, which is one of the nice things about this. To the question that just came up in the chat, are there grants to help nonprofits pay for this? If you want to work with community college students, yes, absolutely. And that's something that we see as a very common funding source, our experiential learning grants. We'll get there in just a moment, James. So thank you for that question. Going back to just some other things to think about here. First, or next, excuse me, is the timing. And I'm only speaking to the advantages of one, because kind of the advantages of one is sort of the disadvantage of to the other. But thinking about if you run it as an ongoing basis, basically it runs until funding is out. We see that and is the most common method for a micro-internship program. Schools tend to like that it's accessible for students and for organizations year-round, so that if a company, for example, is not necessarily available during winter or summer break, they can still participate. Same thing with the students. This is also a lot easier to manage from the sense that life happens, the alum or a company or somebody has an unexpected delay, or a student gets wrapped up or has some unexpected challenge. This still allows both parties to be able to participate in the program, even if, again, some sort of conflict has occurred. These programs also can be re-upped at any time, whether that be an annual budget allocation, which we see, or, oh, I got this funding windfall from XYZ source, an alum, or from, again, we'll talk more about that, but we see all those different examples. The other option is, of course, school breaks, whether that's winter break, summer break, spring break. We haven't seen too much of a demand for spring break just because that's such a short window. But again, that's winter break and summer are the other popular alternative options. And the advantage there is that it's a little bit easier from a marketing standpoint to manage the supply and the demand. So for example, you can tell the alums that, or the employers or organizations, whoever you're engaging, you can post your project during this window, and the students are going to hear about it during this window. And it just makes it, again, real easy to be able to share to both students and employers, this is when to participate in this. We do see that unused funds can roll over into the next iteration of the program if that's easier from an accounting standpoint. We also hear that when funding is not available, we see an increased likelihood that organizations will self-fund those projects that they have excuse me, a need outside of that window that the program is offered. They have full discretion to be able to hire your students and pay for it themselves. And of course, if the program is only available during those specific windows, that really allows them to make it more likely they can do that. Now, we do see schools limit the number of projects that companies are allowed to post. So they all are given that option to self-fund at any time. So certainly that is something that every program to become self-sustainable, paid for by somebody else, that is always a goal and something that we do regularly see. So just to give you a couple case studies about the programs that I just briefly mentioned, Trinity, they call theirs the CAP, or Community Action Program, micro-internship program, or excuse me, Community Alliance, excuse me. So this is tied to Trinity Christian College. This one was set up a little bit differently in the sense that this came not from career services, but from the academic department. In this case, the business dean, who has a particular passion for entrepreneurship. And so the students initially were focused on being enrolled in entrepreneurial coursework. And then after completing those classes, they then would be able and hear about and participate in these micro-internships. The micro-internships themselves are focused on small businesses in and around the Chicagoland area, as that's where the school is located. So that's where it started. Since then, when I spoke actually a few days ago to Dr. Vera, the person that's quoted, they have significant funding opportunities and sources because they are just a lot of enthusiasm about the program and how it aligns both to supporting their goals of trying to make students get as close to graduating as debt-free as possible. This is one of several initiatives that aligns to that goal. And then also supporting the social impact mission of the school. It's a Christian school, and so they focus on engaging nonprofit organizations that have ties to businesses that are religiously affiliated or supporting various other Christian philosophical types of initiatives and programs. So you can, with any of these examples, if it's helpful, you can click on these links, read a little bit more about the program, and I'm always happy to talk more in detail about any of these if that's helpful. The other program I'll highlight is the University of Delaware. They call theirs Blue Hens, or their mascot, Blue Hens Work. Theirs has always been focused on introducing students to careers in public service. And so in their case, the organizations that are allowed to participate must be Delaware-based state government agencies or Delaware-based nonprofits. And so they do most of the promotion to these different entities, but they have focused on those, again, from the get-go, and their program's been around for almost 3 years. This year, though, they decided that they really wanted to try out this winter break model. And so literally I was just on a call with the University of Delaware team about an hour ago, and we were talking about how their promotion to companies, their window to post projects just closed. Now they're promoting to students, and again, just to help supply and demand and make sure that everybody is ready to participate without the distractions of classes and other things that are going on. Another thing to think about are, what are the goals of the program? What are the metrics that are going to determine if it's successful? And so just to give you some ideas, these are what folks in the schools that are developing these programs, they tend to have specific focuses on supporting populations of students that they've identified, engaging alumni in some cases, supporting those small businesses or maybe nonprofit organizations. Oftentimes a fringe benefit is introducing students to career opportunities that they may not have otherwise considered, like that University of Delaware program. When we are working with the schools to identify these KPIs, we also help with survey questions, so that whatever those KPIs are, let's make sure we're asking about it in those post-program surveys so that you can measure, did the program meet those goals? And virtually all of the programs you can see are reporting on and really excited about, okay, how many students or organizations have participated? How much have students earned for these different projects? And of course, the overall satisfaction metrics that everyone needs and wants to report on. And that's all just inherent with these programs. They're all going to include those types of metrics with the final reporting. And then James, to your question, and I'm sure top of mind for many of you, how do schools fund this? Well, we typically see 3 key buckets. First of all, it comes from an institutional funding source. So there's a lot of common ones here, grants being probably the most common overall, but we do see institutional funding be a very popular source for many of these programs. One thing, and I put this under consideration, one thing we're hearing right now are those use or lose budgets, that this can be a way to make sure that the money gets spent, and again, going to the students to support these various experiential learning initiatives. Because maybe it was a grant, maybe it was an experiential learning budget that didn't get fully allocated or used or whatever that might be. We also hear that schools will go to alumni or hear about alumni who have specific passions and want to support experiential learning or professional development for students, or students with specific barriers to being able to do paid employment. This is where that can fit in. Corporate sponsors are another popular use case, or corporations in general. This might tie in perfectly to their philanthropic initiatives, But we do hear and see a lot of companies that say, I want to deepen my relationship with XYZ target schools. And so our business development team is having those conversations with the companies in our network, but you telling your employers, hey, did you know micro internships are a great way to meet our students, to get to know who might be the best next hire for your team? If they hear it from you, the credibility in terms of knowing that your students want to do this will be significantly greater than if they hear it from anyone else. And so this is a great way for you to plant that seed. And again, the nice thing about all of this is the money that's being spent is going to the students. And so for those corporations, one way to sell this to them is to just essentially tell them, hey, whatever you're spending on various recruiting initiatives, again, think of the optics. If you're doing a micro internship as an audition, you're essentially paying the student to do an interview. And this is a great way for those companies who might be concerned about their brand image or their reputation. This can be a way to really show that these companies value early career talent, so much so that they're going to, again, invest in those students early on. Another, kind of just to give you a couple of specific examples with these programs and how all the finances work. Every one of these is customized, but just to give you a little bit of a typical breakdown, for a total program that costs, say, $10,000, $8,000 of that's going to your students, just off the top. The $2,000 that is retained by Parker Dewey covers our costs of administering the program, and you'll hear more about that in a moment, but also some the payroll expenses, et cetera, that we incur for managing and paying your students. And so in terms of those student supported numbers, again, think about what sort of budget is being allocated to support students from internship programs. If there's a piece of that pie that can support even more students, that's, again, where a lot of schools are seeing that this could fit in, so that you can, again, stretch those dollars to support even more students. And so these are just a few examples. This the total student supported numbers does assume that the students are doing 20-hour micro internships and receiving $400 upon completion. But that, again, is something that is flexible, determined by you. In some cases, the schools will say, you know what, we'd maybe like to adjust that down a little bit. Cost of living is a little cheaper here, or whatever. We want to just make stretch those dollars even more, and the students make less. Or sometimes schools will pay more in some cases. Or they may say, we're just going to do shorter projects. And again, some schools say, no, I want the students to do longer ones. And again, you have that discretion when developing these programs. Speaking of programs, how do we make it easy? Well, as I mentioned before, we have a lot of expertise in building out and managing these different programs. And so just to give you a piece of what, some insight about what that program management entails, I'm just going to break it down for you. First and foremost, the websites to get your students and employers, whoever's participating in the program, to get them started. And so that we customize those with the specifics about your program, also including micro internship templates that are already pre-designed and developed following whatever rules you set up for that program. So for example, clicking on one of those templates will automatically pre-populate a project that pays whatever you want the students to make and that are available exclusively to whatever students you want. So whether it be all of your students or that subset of your students. We set all of that up for you so that you don't have to. This just makes it easy, and then we'll send you the URLs so that you then are ready to go to share the program with whomever you want. Which leads me to the second piece. As many of you are familiar, we have a very robust marketing toolkit with a ton of pre-made collateral, but we'll share with you. These are the things you may want to send and when you're introducing your micro internship program. We'll share with you the email, the flyer, or whatever, just so that you can get up and rolling with this program as quickly and ready to go and to share with whomever as possible. So again, you don't need to worry about building any of this yourself. Use our resources as a starting point, And then you can, again, have more bandwidth to offer this without adding extra work for your team. The real area where we can help significantly is the day-to-day administration. Because as I'm sure you can imagine, when organizations post projects, they don't always read as carefully as we'd like them to. Same thing with students. And so we have a team of folks that manage these kinds of things on the back end to make sure that if a company posts the project and adjusts some things so that now they made it so that they'll pay a whole lot more than what the program will pay, we'll handle adjusting that and communicating with the student or the employer or whoever needs to be involved to make sure that, again, it's not anything that you need to worry about. So we take care of all of the day-to-day administration, the surveys and so on. We can distribute those to the various stakeholders upon completion. So in other words, this can be a set it and forget it type of initiative for you to bring to your campus community without adding extra work on your team, because our team takes care of it. We have a whole team of folks that's what they do. But you'll also have those insights, that on-demand access to be able to see how many of your students have created accounts, posted projects, etc. And all of this is available through Parker Dewey Plus now. So you can see who are these projects that have been posted, who's posted at what organizations, the project titles, the URLs, the student information, and so on. You can download any of that on demand through Parker Dewey Plus. And then lastly, you can download and access an impact report, again, through Parker Dewey Plus, to be able to, at any given time, determine what was the impact, how much did my students earn, what were the demographics of the students who participated, what kind of feedback have my students received from these organizations, and so on. Which leads me to my final couple of things to think about. So how do you get started? Well, first step is thinking about your goals. So who do you want to support? Students, organizations, those are the two things to initially start. I would also suggest that if you're interested in this, float the ideas with some other institutional stakeholders, faculty, deans, alumni, and so on, just because they may have other initiatives where this might align beautifully and make it easy for you all to create a really value-added opportunity for your students and these other stakeholders. Next thing is funding source. And this is also why you should think about talking to some of these other teams, because they may have the money to be able to fund this. That's what we've seen through some of these different initiatives and programs. But again, the Career Center academic affairs budgets, grants, alumni, donors, and so on. And then I can't de-emphasize enough that use or lose budget. We've seen several programs where the school has specifically said, yeah, we're going to spend this money on a speaker just to use it, but then we wanted to put it in, we heard about this and we wanted to put it in the students' pockets and the meaningful impact that that can create. The next thing, and we'll collaborate with you on this, is establishing what we call the rules. So who's eligible to participate in the program, both students and employers? What's the cost per project? How much do you want the students to make? How long will these projects be? We have calculators and things just to help you sort through all the math and how all this would shake out for you. And then the last consideration is the timeline. Are you focused on a specific school break, summer, winter, whatever? Or is this something that you'd love to launch early in the new year and have available and see it grow so that maybe it can be expanded for fall of 2025, as one example. And then how you decide to get started, that's where we are here and happy and ready to help, where all of those different aspects of program management, we take care of for you. The marketing materials, setting up the project templates, making sure that you have those websites ready and so on. And then we'll give you the collateral so that you can share it with whoever you want to engage whenever you're ready to do so. And then the last thing is the results. So on an ongoing basis, you'll have access to that Parker Dewey Plus tool to be able to measure the students, the feedback they've received, and all the different impact. Now, a couple last things that I wanted to also highlight. How long can any of this take? We can have a program up and running as soon as we understand those rules within a week. And can you add additional funding at any time? Absolutely. We see most programs start very small with a use or lose type budget, real small, just to see, is there an appetite for something like this? And then it grows over time. So it's up to you but there's a lot of flexibility and opportunity for this to grow. Trinity Christian College's program was a great example of that. It started off relatively small, but that initial success, and particularly the data that we were able to share through the impact report that we developed, they've been able to acquire significant funding to essentially be able to fund this program in perpetuity. So I want to wrap up with sharing a few case studies, but again, love to answer any questions that might be top of mind. But going back to the poll results, I do want to make sure that I touch on a couple of case studies that might be relevant. And so few of you mentioned an interest in engaging faculty. So I do want to touch on that and how that could work. We hear regularly the question, can a micro-internship program be administered as part of an in-class assignment? Do we see examples of that? And yes, Cal Poly Pomona's program is the best example that we have currently right now, not only because of the scale of it, because as you can see from the numbers, they have over 1,000 students who completed or are completing these in-class projects. It is a massive undertaking from their perspective because they are working with so many different faculty and community partners in allowing and making sure that this program is administered in adherence with the variety of different grants that they have that are funding it. So our role in this program has predominantly been supporting the students and the organizations on the platform itself, paying the students and so on, and then providing back-end administrative support on via the Parker Dewey Plus platform. But again, just to give you the sense of scale, over $380,000 have already been earned from these students, and that doesn't include the money that the 400 or so in-progress projects are going to be putting in the pockets of these students as they wrap up their projects within the next few weeks. So this is something that certainly can and does scale. In the case of Cal Poly Pomona, that program started with 13 students 2 years ago, and then it's just massively grown ever since because they're seeing the impact. They're seeing and able to secure grants focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, on introducing students to careers in STEM. Those have been the two primary sources of funds, and then this had again allowed it to scale even further. About those class projects, though, I do want to have you keep in mind, we do have a few rules about administering these. And the reason for these rules, first and foremost, is we want to make sure it's all fair to the students. And so, for example, we only allow micro-internships to be part of a class if funding is available to support all of the students. And the reason for that is we never want it to be a situation where a student is not able to complete a class successfully or graduate or anything like that because they don't have, or they couldn't get picked for a micro-internship. As a reminder, most micro-internships on Parker Dewey, it's the company who posted it that's picking the student. Now we can manage things where it's done differently, but that's how most of them are being administered. And so that is why that rule is in place. It's out of fairness to the students. The other rule that we have is that micro-internships must be paid fairly. And so $15 per hour is the bottom threshold for the micro-internships on Parker Dewey. And we don't do anything that's unpaid. Just philosophically, that's just not something that we think is fair. One other thing to keep in mind is that the students are not completing background checks. And so the other category of projects that just don't work well in this model are those where students are going to be working with vulnerable populations. So think school settings with minors, hospital settings. That doesn't work well for this model. And so we do see projects that align to students' interest in education or healthcare, but they tend to be more administrative or research in nature, as opposed to having direct contact with kids or individuals in a hospital. So just keep those things in mind. There are a few additional projects and program examples. So certainly welcome you to dig through any and all of these examples. I'll highlight one other here, this Wayfinders program with John Carroll University. That was funded through a local grant, but I loved this particular testimonial because after year one, the data that we were able to provide for them, they actually got 50% more than they asked for when they were up for a grant renewal because of the powerful impact of that data. And they found that 19 of the projects that they have completed through their program have led to an additional or longer term opportunity, which again, we love. Speaking of students getting hired long-term, Patricia from George Washington University, after just a 10-hour micro-internship, secured a full-time job with Ernst & Young through the George Washington University program. The success story that we wrote for this program, she called it a life-changing study break, because in that few minutes it took her to apply for the project, she has her full-time job. And again, we just love impacting stories like that. And then Florida A&M has been a phenomenal partner when it comes to employer engagement. Their students have earned over $180,000. Most of that has been funded through a grant that FAMU was a beneficiary of. They didn't secure themselves. But again, this has been something that they took advantage of and that they have fully promoted to their employers and alumni and other networks and been able to really see their students reap the benefits. And they promote it very actively via students and to employers. So those are just a couple of examples of how they're doing so. And then I'll also highlight University of California, Irvine. Their partnership has been focused on their Entrepreneur Center, so their small business entrepreneurship focused side of their campus. And they have engaged employer partners, particularly companies in and around Orange County where they're located, but they've also hired some of their micro interns themselves. My favorite example is they had students run social media for their annual giving day. And they experienced more successful annual giving day than they ever had before, such that they repeated the model the year after they did it. So again, some really, really great testimonials and showing the impact of these different experiences. So to that, I want to ask one final question I'd love to just hear real quick is how we can help. So after today's conversation, what are your thoughts? How can we help? So is it, I want to get started, let's have a conversation, I want to meet, awesome. Or, I have a lot to think about, maybe later, no problem. This is it for me right now, thanks anyway, no worries at all, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Or, you know what, I still have a plethora of questions, I'm happy to stick around and ask some of their, answer some of those if I can help, but also love to have a conversation if your question might take more than the couple of minutes that we all still have together. But you can see, to get started, we'll send the deck and the slides and the recording around, but it starts with just where does this fit in for you? And so love to hear more on how this might help align with some of what you have going on. But most of all, thank you for your interest, taking the time to just noodle over some of these ideas, and really, really excited at the opportunity to hear where and how this could fit in to support you and your institution, your students, and anyone else that you might have top of mind.